So today we're diving into a really challenging psychoanalytic argument from the analyst Helen Morgan. Her thesis is pretty profound. She argues that to truly get a handle on racism and how to dismantle it, we first have to turn the lens inward. We have to examine the very idea of whiteness, not as a biological reality, but as a powerful, deeply psychological construct.
And right there, that's the core proposition that's going to frame everything we talk about. Morgan's point is that whiteness isn't some passive identity, it's an active psychological system. So if you want to take it apart, you first have to understand its blueprints, how it was built, how it works on our minds, and most importantly, the kind of psychological work it takes to see beyond its invisible walls.
Okay, so where in the world did this powerful category even come from? Morgan is insistent on this point. To get its psychological power, you have to understand that whiteness is not natural, it's an invention, and it has a very specific origin story. And, like any invention, it was designed to solve a problem. In this case, the problem for the ruling elite was simple. How do you hold on to a fragile power structure? Whiteness became their killer app, their strategic tool of social engineering, created for the very specific purpose of locking in their economic and political advantage.
You can actually pinpoint the moment this happened in the historical record. Picture this. It's 17th century Virginia. The plantation elite are looking at their workforce, and they see a huge threat. Enslaved Africans and poor European indentured servants are starting to realize they have a lot in common. They're seeing each other as allies, united by their shared economic struggle. So to break that potential alliance, the elite engineered a solution. They passed new laws that created a brand new legal identity, white. And then they attached exclusive privileges to it. And the outcome of this strategy? Well, it's crystal clear. A massive wedge was driven right through the laboring class. Suddenly, poor Europeans were given an incentive to identify with their wealthy masters based on this new white status, instead of identifying with their fellow laborers based on class. It completely shattered that class solidarity, and, just like that, the power of the elite was secured.
But just creating a legal category, that doesn't really explain the deep psychological grip this idea has, right? How did it become so incredibly potent? Well, the argument is that the inventors of whiteness tapped into something much, much deeper, a set of powerful, ancient associations that were already lurking in the human unconscious. I mean, just think about it. In cultures all over the world, the words white and black already carried this immense symbolic weight. They are tied to day and night, life and death, good and evil. So, by linking these really primal, deep-seated associations to skin color, the system basically did most of the psychological heavy lifting all by itself. It automatically coded one group as inherently pure and the other as inherently suspect.
And this brings us right to a core psychoanalytic idea, the shadow. That's the part of ourselves where we tuck away everything we find unacceptable. Morgan argues, pulling from the analyst James Hillman, that for the construct of whiteness to keep up its appearance of purity, it needed a screen. It needed somewhere to project its own unwanted stuff, its greed, its violence, its shadow. And it found that screen in blackness. Now, if you build a system on such a deep psychological split, it's going to need some pretty powerful defenses to keep itself from collapsing. So how does it survive being questioned? Morgan points to two key psychological tricks. The first line of defense is what the philosopher Charles Mills calls white ignorance. Now, it is crucial to get this. This isn't just a passive lack of information, like not knowing a fact. It's an active, motivated process of not knowing. It's a willful refusal to see the realities of a system, all to protect one's own psychological comfort and, of course, material privilege. And this leads to a really profound irony, right? The very people who created and benefit from the system are often the least equipped to actually see it clearly. Their ignorance becomes a central pillar that holds the whole structure up. The second defense mechanism is something called disavowal. And this is a real mental sleight of hand. It's how you manage a massive contradiction. How do you benefit from a racist system while still seeing yourself as a good, moral, non-racist person? In a nutshell, it's the art of knowing something and not knowing it at the exact same time. And we learn to do this really early on. Morgan gives this powerful example. A little kid sees something that looks unfair and asks about it. The adult, feeling super uncomfortable, shuts it down with something like, "Oh, we don't see color. Everyone's the same."
Now, the child doesn't learn that racism is wrong. They learn that talking about racism is wrong. And right there, a kind of deadness, a disavowal gets created around the entire subject. So, given how strong these psychological defenses are, what exactly is this work of whiteness that Morgan is calling for? I mean, what does it actually look like when the rubber meets the road?
Well, the argument, which is supported by analysts like Adrian Harris, is that any real meaningful work across racial lines has to start with work within white individuals and communities. This isn't about helping other people. It's about taking responsibility for dismantling the internal psychological structures that keep the whole system going in the first place. And to show us what this looks like, Morgan tells this incredible story from a therapy group she was running. It all boils down to this one really awkward question.
So, get this. In an all-white therapy group, a woman admits to having a fleeting, prejudiced thought. It's a thought she's ashamed of, but it popped into her head, and she has the courage to say it out loud. And now the group is at a critical fork in the road. How are they going to handle this raw, uncomfortable piece of truth?
Morgan says they basically had three choices. Path number one, make her the scapegoat. She's the one racist in the room. Path two, rush in and assure her it wasn't racist at all. Basically just erase the whole moment. Or path three, the hardest one. Use her honesty as an invitation for everyone else in the room to look at their own similar uncomfortable thoughts. And that third path, that is the work of whiteness. It's the difficult, courageous act of refusing to push these thoughts back into the darkness. Instead, you bring them into the light so they can be consciously examined, understood, and ultimately owned.
But let's be real, why on earth would anyone choose to do this difficult, uncomfortable work? Morgan's final point is that this isn't just about being a good person. The stakes are deeply personal for everyone involved. She cites the psychoanalyst Joel Koval here, who argued that any system that diminishes another person ultimately diminishes the one doing the diminishing. In other words, to cling to an artificial identity like whiteness is to actually stunt your own psychological growth. It limits your ability to live a full, authentic human life.
This whole idea is captured perfectly in her central metaphor, which comes from a painting by Frank Bowling. Imagine a huge white swan, this symbol of purity, but it's trapped. It's struggling in a pool of thick black oil, which is itself a product of exploitation. It's this devastating image that just nails the core idea. Whiteness is ultimately imprisoned and contaminated by the very system it created to dominate.
And that brings us to her final and maybe most provocative thought. Morgan concludes that she wants her color back. In her view, the work of whiteness isn't a journey into guilt. It's a path toward liberation. It's about letting go of a limiting, artificial construct so you can reclaim a more complete and vibrant humanity. And that leaves all of us with a central question of her entire thesis. What would it actually mean to do that work and get your color back?